The scavengers Dawn, the twin sons of Kethera, painted the desert wasteland in shades of copper and gold as Jackson Reed emerged from his underground workshop. The morning air carried the familiar scent of ozone and rusted metal, remnants of the Great War that had scarred this frontier world decades ago. He adjusted his worn leather jacket and squinted at the horizon, where the twisted remains of ancient battleships jutted from the sand like the bones of metal giants. JXON had made this desolate place his home for 3 years now, far from the crowded core worlds where his past could catch up with him. His workshop was carved into the rocky cliffs overlooking the shattered plains, a maze of salvage technology and half-finished projects that somehow managed to keep him fed and sheltered. Most importantly, it kept him hidden. His companion, a battered repair droid he'd nicknamed Grim, rolled up beside him on treads that had seen better decades. The droid's optical sensors flickered with what Jackson had learned to recognize as excitement. Another crash site detected, Boss Grim announced in his gravelly synthesized voice. Energy signature suggests recent impact. Could be profitable. Jackson nodded, shouldering his salvage pack. Fresh wreckage meant untouched tech, and untouched tech meant he could eat something other than protein paste for the next few weeks. He climbed onto his sand speeder, a patchwork vehicle that looked like it might fall apart at any moment but ran like a dream thanks to his skilled hands. The crash site was 3 kilometers out, marked by a pillar of black smoke rising into the pale morning sky. As they approached, Jackson felt his excitement dim into caution. The wreckage was unlike anything he'd seen before. The hull was made of some kind of adaptive metal that shifted color in the sunlight, and the design was both elegant and deadly. This wasn't a cargo hauler or mining vessel. This was a warship. The mysterious warrior steam hissed from the cracked hull as Jackson approached on foot, his scanner beeping softly. The energy readings were off the charts, but something else caught his attention. Movement. Someone was alive. In there, he found her in what must have been the cockpit. Though the controls were so advanced, they looked more like works of art than instruments. She was slumped against the pilot's seat, her armor cracked and sparking. The suit was incredible, made of overlapping plates that seemed to flow like liquid metal, with circuit patterns that pulsed with faint blue light. But it was her face that made Jackson pause. Even unconscious and covered in cuts, she was strikingly beautiful. Her skin had a pale, almost luminescent quality, and her hair was silver white, cropped short in a practical style. She looked human, but there was something otherworldly about her features, too perfect, too symmetrical. Grim, run a bioscan, he whispered. The droid extended a sensor array. Life signs stable, but weak. Species unknown. Armor appears to be integrated with her nervous system. Boss, this is way beyond our usual salvage. Jackson studied the unconscious woman. Her armor bore no insignia he recognized, but the craftsmanship was extraordinary. Whoever she was, she'd been in a serious fight. Plasma burns scored the metal. Plates and several systems were completely dead. The smart thing would be to take what he could carry and leave her for the desert scavengers. But as he looked at her face, something stirred in his chest. She looked young, vulnerable despite the fearsome armor, and she was alone, just like him. "Help me get her out of here," he said finally. Grim's optical sensors dimmed with what Jackson recognized as the droid equivalent of a sigh. "This is how we get in trouble, boss. Every single time. The Forge of Healing, getting her back to the workshop was a challenge. The armor was incredibly heavy, and even with Grim's help, it took them. the better part of an hour to load her onto the speeder. She remained unconscious throughout the journey, her breathing shallow but steady. Jackson's workshop was a marvel of organized chaos. Workbenches lined the walls, covered with tools, spare parts, and half-finished projects. The air hummed with the sound of generators and environmental systems, all cobbled together from salvaged technology. He'd spent months carving additional chambers into the cliff face, creating a space that was part laboratory, part home, and part fortress. He laid her on the medical table he'd built for emergency situations. It wasn't much, but it had saved his life more than once. The armor's systems were still partially active, monitoring her vital signs and attempting to repair itself. The technology was so advanced it made his own considerable skills seem primitive. By comparison, Grim, I need you to interface with her armor's systems. See if you can find a manual release. The droid extended a data probe and connected to one of the armor's ports. Interesting. The armor has built-in medical protocols. It's been keeping her alive, but it's running on emergency power. If we don't get her out soon, both she and the suit will shut down permanently. Jackson nodded, his hands already moving over the armor's surface. He'd been working with alien technology for years, but this was something special. The plates were held together by magnetic fields and neural interfaces, responding to the wearer's thoughts and emotions. It was less like armor and more like a second skin. Finding the release mechanism took him 2 hours of careful probing and analysis. When he finally triggered it, the armor flowed away from her body like liquid mercury, revealing the woman beneath. She wore a simple black bodysuit underneath, and without the bulk of the armor, she looked even more delicate. But appearances were deceiving. As Jackson treated her wounds, he noticed the lean muscle definition of a trained warrior, and scars that spoke of battles fought and won. Her hands were calloused from weapons use, and there was a small tattoo on her left wrist that looked like a constellation. The awakening she woke 3 days later, her eyes snapping open with the alertness of someone accustomed to danger. They were violet, a color Jackson had never seen in human eyes, and they fixed on him with an intensity that made his breath catch. "Where am I?" she asked, her voice carrying a slight accent he couldn't place. "My workshop," Jackson replied, stepping back to give her space. "You crashed in the desert. Your ship was pretty banged up." She sat up slowly, wincing as her injuries made themselves known. Her gaze swept the workshop, taking in every detail with the practiced eye of someone who'd learned to assess threats quickly. "Who are you?" Jackson read. "I'm a mechanic and salvager. This is Grim." He gestured to the droid, who had rolled over to observe the proceedings. "What's your name?" She hesitated, as if considering whether to tell him the truth. "Zara," she said finally. "Zara Thorne. Well, Zara Thorne, you're lucky to be alive. That armor of yours kept you breathing, but it was failing fast. I've never seen technology like that before." At the mention of her armor, Zara's expression sharpened. She looked around until she spotted it arranged on a nearby workbench, its plates dim and lifeless. "You removed it. Had to. It was killing you." "Don't worry, I didn't damage anything. I'm good at what I do." Zara studied him for a long moment, and Jackson felt as though she was seeing right through him. "You're not from around here," she said. It wasn't a question. Core worlds, originally, but that's ancient history. He pulled up a chair and sat down, keeping his distance. "What about you? That ship of yours isn't any design I recognize." "I'm from far away," she said simply. "Farther than you'd believe. Something in her tone warned him not to press the issue. Instead, he focused on practical matters. You're going to need time to recover. Your ship's beyond repair, but I might be able to fix your armor. It's incredible work, but the power cells are completely drained. For the first time, Zara's expression softened slightly. You would do that? For a stranger, Jackson shrugged. I fix things. It's what I do. Besides, you're going to need that armor if you want to survive out here. The desert isn't forgiving, and there are things in the deep waste that make sandstorms look friendly. The art of restoration over the following days. Jackson threw himself into the challenge of understanding Zara's armor. It was like nothing he'd ever encountered, a fusion of technology and artistry that bordered on the magical. The power systems were based on principles he'd never seen, drawing energy from multiple sources, including solar radiation, kinetic motion, and even the wearer's own bioelectric field. Zara watched him work, saying little but observing everything. She was a quick study, asking intelligent questions about his tools and techniques. Despite her injuries, she insisted on helping where she could, her hands surprisingly gentle as she assisted with delicate repairs. You're wasted out here, she said one evening as they worked by lamplight. This kind of skill, this intuitive understanding of technology, it's rare. You could name your price on any of the developed worlds. Jackson didn't look up from the power coupling he was repairing. Maybe I like it here. Maybe I like being left alone, running from something, she asked softly. He paused in his work. Aren't we all? She was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, again, her voice was distant. Yes, I suppose we are. As the days passed, Jackson found himself looking forward to their conversations. Zara was intelligent and well-traveled, with stories from worlds he'd only heard about in legends. She spoke of crystal cities that sang in the wind, of forests where the trees grew in perfect spirals, of oceans that glowed with their own inner light. But she never spoke of where she came from, or why she'd been fleeing through space in a damaged warship. There was a sadness in her eyes, a weight of loss that she carried like a physical burden. Jackson recognized it because he carried something similar himself. The test of trust. The armor was nearly complete when the first visitors arrived. Jackson was in the workshop, making final adjustments to the helmet's targeting system, when Grimm's sensors detected incoming aircraft. 3 sleek fighters approaching fast from the east, their transponders broadcasting pirate codes. Zara, he called out, but she was already moving, her enhanced senses having picked up the threat before his instruments had. She was wearing the partially restored armor, its systems humming with renewed power. Pirates, she said, her voice tight with tension. They've found me. Friends of yours? Jackson asked, grabbing his plasma rifle from its rack. Hardly. She moved to the workshop's reinforced window, peering out at the approaching ships. They're scavengers, following the energy trail from my crash. They think I'm helpless. The first fighter roared over the workshop, its weapon systems already charging. Jackson had dealt with pirates before, but usually they were content to take what they wanted and leave. These ships were different. They were hunting. We can't fight 3 fighters, he said. Even with your armor, we're outgunned. Zara turned to him, and for a moment, her mask of careful control slipped. He saw fear there, but also a fierce determination that took his breath away. Then we better make sure we don't have to fight them all at once. She moved to the workshop's defense console, her fingers dancing over controls that Jackson had thought were too complex for anyone but himself to operate. The cliff face around his workshop was honeycombed with hidden weapon emplacements, a security system he'd spent months installing. Under Zara's skilled touch, they came online with smooth precision. "Where did you learn to do that?" he asked. "Spent my life learning to fight," she replied, "and to survive." The first fighter came in low, strafing the workshop with plasma fire, but Zara was ready. The cliff's hidden cannons opened up, catching the pirate ship in a crossfire that sent it spinning out of control. It crashed into the desert floor in a ball of flame and twisted metal. The remaining two fighters pulled back, circling like hunting birds over the cum system. A harsh voice crackled to life. "Impressive, princess, but you can't hide forever. We know who you are, and we know what you're worth. Surrender now, and we'll make your death quick." Zara's face went pale at the word princess, and Jackson felt the final piece of the puzzle clicking into place. The incredible armor, the way she carried herself, the sadness in her eyes. She wasn't just a warrior, she was royalty. "Zara," he said softly, "who are you really?" She looked at him, and in that moment, he saw the weight of secrets she'd been carrying. "Someone who's lost everything," she whispered. "Someone who's been running from a throne that no longer exists." The fighters were moving again, coming in for another attack, but this time Jackson was ready. He'd spent years preparing for trouble, and his workshop was more fortress than home. As the battle raged around them, he found himself fighting not just for survival, but for the woman who'd brought hope back into his life. The last fighter fell as the sun set over the desert, its wreckage joining the graveyard of metal that stretched across the wasteland. In the sudden silence that followed, Jackson and Zara stood together, both breathing hard from the adrenaline of battle. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what? For not asking questions, for fixing what was broken, for giving me a chance to be something other than what I was born to be." Jackson reached out and took her hand, feeling the warmth of her skin through the armor's gloves. "Maybe we're both running from something, but maybe it's time to stop running and start building something new." As the stars emerged in the darkening sky, Zara squeezed his hand. "Maybe you're right," she said. "Maybe it's time to stop being afraid of who I really am." The desert wind whispered across the plains, carrying with it the promise of change. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new enemies, and new revelations about the woman who'd crashed into his life like a fallen star. But tonight, in the quiet of his workshop, Jackson Reed had found something he'd thought lost forever. Hope, the royal truth, the morning after the pirate attack. Zara stood on the edge of the cliff overlooking the wreckage below. Her armor gleamed in the early sunlight, fully restored and humming with power. But her expression was troubled, distant in a way that made Jackson's chest tighten with concern. "You're leaving," he said. It wasn't a question. She turned to face him, and he saw the conflict in her violet eyes. "I have to. Staying here puts you in danger." "Those pirates weren't random scavengers, Jackson. They were hunting me specifically." "Because you're a princess." Zara flinched at the word. "Because I'm the last heir to a throne that was stolen in blood and treachery. My family ruled the astral dominion for 300 years. We brought peace to 17 star systems, united, dozens of species under one banner." Her voice cracked, and I watched it all burn. Jackson moved closer, close enough to see the tears she was trying to hold back. "What happened? A coup, led by my father's most trusted general, Corvin Drax. He convinced half the fleet that my family had grown weak, that we were too soft on the outer colonies. When the attack came, I was off-world on a diplomatic mission. By the time I returned, the capital was in flames and my parents were dead. The pain in her voice cut through Jackson like a blade. He'd lost his own family in the core world wars, but that was different. That was random violence, the chaos of conflict. This was betrayal on a scale he could barely comprehend. "How long have you been running?" he asked. 6 months. I've been gathering intelligence, trying to find loyal forces, but Drax has been thorough. Anyone who might support my claim has been eliminated or driven into hiding." She looked out at the desert again. "I thought if I could reach the outer rim, find mercenaries willing to fight for coin rather than politics, I might have a chance. But my ship was damaged in a skirmish with Drax's hunters. So you crashed here, and I found you." She nodded, a stroke of luck that probably saved my life. "But I can't ask you to get involved in this, Jackson. This is a war between star systems. People I care about have already died because of me." Before Jackson could respond, Grimm's sensors chimed with an incoming transmission. The droid rolled over, to them, his optical array flickering with excitement. "Boss, we're receiving a coded signal on a very specific frequency. It's using encryption protocols I've never seen before." Zara's expression sharpened. "Play it." The message was brief, delivered in a woman's voice speaking a language Jackson didn't recognize. But Zara understood every word, and the relief that flooded her features was like watching the sun break through storm clouds. "Nix," she whispered. "She's alive." The Guardian's arrival, Nix. Valdris arrived 2 hours later in a ship that made Zara's crashed fighter look primitive. It was sleek and deadly, its hull absorbing light in ways that made it almost invisible against the desert backdrop. The vessel landed with barely a whisper, its advanced engines making no sound at all. The woman who emerged was tall and fierce, with dark skin marked by intricate tattoos that seemed to move in the light. Her armor was similar to Zara's, but colored in deep purples and blacks, and she moved with the fluid grace of a predator. Her eyes, when they fixed on Jackson, were like chips of obsidian. "Princess," she said, dropping to one knee before Zara, "I've been searching for you across half the galaxy." "Rise, Nix. There's no need for ceremony here." Zara gestured to Jackson. "This is Jackson Reed. He saved my life and repaired my armor. Jackson, this is Nix Valdris, my guardian and closest friend." Nix studied Jackson with undisguised suspicion. "Human, on a frontier world. How fortunate that you happened to be here when the princess crashed." Nix Zara's voice carried a warning. "He's not our enemy. Forgive me, princess, but in the past 6 months, trust has become a luxury we can't afford." Nix's hand rested casually on the grip of a weapon that looked like it could cut through starship armor. "How do we know he's not working for Drax?" Jackson stepped forward, meeting her hostile gaze without flinching. "Because if I was, you'd already be dead. I've got enough firepower in this workshop to level a small city, and you walked right into the middle of it." For a moment, the tension was thick enough to cut. Then Nix laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a storm. "I like him, princess. He has spine." Zara smiled for the first time in days. "I told you he was special." As they talked, Nix filled them in on the situation across the galaxy. Drax had consolidated his power quickly, using fear and propaganda to maintain control. The official story was that the royal family had been killed in a terrorist attack, and that he was now the rightful ruler of the Astral Dominion. "But there are still loyal forces," Nix explained. "Admiral Torix commands a small fleet in the outer spiral. Captain Vega holds the mining colonies in the Helios sector. They're waiting for a sign, a reason to hope. And the people, Zara asked, suffering. Drax has imposed martial law across the core worlds. Anyone who speaks against his rule disappears in the night. The outer colonies are being stripped of resources to fund his war machine. Jackson listened to their conversation with growing understanding. This wasn't just about a princess reclaiming her throne. This was about the fate of billions of people across 17 star systems. "What's the plan?" he asked. Both women looked at him in surprise. "The plan," Nyx repeated, "to take back your kingdom. You're not just going to run forever, are you?" Zara and Nyx exchanged glances. "It's not that simple," Zara said. "Drax controls the capital fleet, the orbital defense platforms, and the royal treasury. Even with our loyal forces, we're outnumbered 10 to 1. "But you have something he doesn't," Jackson said. "You have legitimacy. You're the rightful heir. That has to count for something." "It counts for everything," Nyx said slowly, "but only if we can prove it to the people." The coronation crown was destroyed in the attack. Without it, Zara can't officially claim the throne. "Then we make a new one," Jackson said simply. Both women stared at him. "Make a new crown?" Zara asked. "Not just any crown. A crown that proves your right to rule." "I've been studying your armor, Zara. The technology is incredible, but it's also symbolic. Every plate, every circuit pattern, it tells a story. The crown should be the same, a fusion of old and new, tradition and innovation." Nyx leaned forward, interested despite herself. "What are you thinking?" Jackson was already moving, his mind racing with possibilities. "Give me 3 days. I'll need access to your ship's fabrication systems, and I'll need to understand more about your people's history and traditions." Jackson Zara caught his arm. "Why are you doing this? This isn't your fight." He looked down into her violet eyes and felt his heart skip a beat. Maybe it is now. The Forge of Legends for 3 days, Jackson worked with an intensity that amazed, even grim. He absorbed everything Nyx and Zara could teach him about the Astral Dominion's history, its symbols and traditions. He studied the ancient coronation crowns, understanding not just their form but their meaning. The crown he designed was unlike anything that had come before. It incorporated elements from a dozen different species within the Dominion, each represented by unique, crystalline structures that would glow with their own inner light. The base was forged from the same adaptive metal as Zara's armor, but enhanced with patterns that told the story of her people's journey from a single world to a galactic civilization. But the true masterpiece was the central crystal. Jackson had taken fragments from Zara's damaged ship and combined them with rare earth elements from Kethra's core. The result was a gem that seemed to contain swirling galaxies within its depths, beautiful and alien and unmistakably royal. "It's magnificent," Zara breathed when he finally showed it to her. "But how do we know it will be accepted?" "The old ways are important to many of our people." "Because it embodies the old ways while embracing the new," Jackson explained. "Look at the base patterns. They're the same ones used in the first crown 300 years ago. But the crystal represents something new. Unity, cooperation between species, the idea that strength comes from diversity, not dominance." Nyx ran her fingers over the crown's surface, feeling the subtle vibrations of its internal systems. "It's not just decorative, is it?" Jackson grinned. "It's integrated with the same technology as Zara's armor. When she wears it, she'll be connected to every communication system in the Dominion. She'll be able to speak directly to her people, to let them know she's alive and fighting for them. As they prepared to leave Kethera, Jackson found himself torn between excitement and dread. He was about to embark on an adventure beyond his wildest dreams, but he was also leaving behind the only home he'd known for years. "You don't have to come with us," Zara said quietly as they loaded supplies into Nix's ship. "This is going to be dangerous. We'll be hunted across the galaxy." "I know," he replied, "but I'm not letting you face this alone." She smiled, and the warmth in her expression made his heart race. "Thank you for everything." As they lifted off from the desert world, Jackson looked back at his workshop one last time. He'd built a life there, carved out a place where he could be safe and forgotten. But now he was choosing something else. He was choosing to matter, to be part of something larger than himself. Where to first? He asked. Nix consulted her navigation charts, the Helios sector. "If we can convince Captain Vega to join us, her mining fleet could give us the resources we need for a real campaign." And after that, Zara settled into the co-pilot seat, the new crown secured in a protective case beside her. "After that, we go home. We remind the galaxy what it means to hope." As the ship jumped to hyperspace, carrying them toward an uncertain future, Jackson realized he'd found something he'd never expected to find again: purpose, and maybe, if he was very lucky, love. The price of loyalty. Their first stop was the mining station, Olympia, a massive orbital platform that served as the headquarters for the Helios sector mining operations. Captain Isabella Vega was a legend in her own right, a former military officer who'd resigned in protest when Drax began his rise to power. The meeting was tense from the start. Vega was a hard woman, scarred by decades of dangerous work in the asteroid fields. She listened to Zara's story without comment, her grey eyes giving nothing away. "You're asking me to commit my people to a war they might not survive," she said finally. "My miners aren't soldiers, princess. They're workers, trying to make a living in a hostile universe." "They're also citizens of the Dominion," Zara replied. "Under Drax's rule, they'll never be anything more than slaves. He's already started seizing independent mining operations, forcing the workers into government-controlled facilities." Vega's expression darkened. "I've heard the reports. Half my captains have had their operations nationalized in the past month." Jackson leaned forward. "What if we could offer you something better than just resistance? What if we could offer you revolution? Explain." Jackson activated a holographic display showing the crown he'd created. "This isn't just a symbol. It's a communication device, a rallying point, and a weapon all in one. When Princess Zara wears it, she becomes the voice of the Dominion. Every screen, every communication array, every public broadcast system becomes hers to command." Vega studied the hologram with professional interest. "Impressive. But Drax has jammers, scramblers, all kinds of countermeasures." "Not for this," Jackson said confidently. "The technology is based on principles that predate current jamming techniques. It works on quantum entanglement rather than traditional radio waves." For the first time, Vega smiled. "Now that's interesting. You're not just asking us to fight. You're asking us to change the rules of the game." "Exactly," Zara said. "We're not trying to defeat Drax with superior force. We're going to defeat him with superior hope." The negotiations continued for hours, but Jackson could see that Vega was convinced. By the time they left Olympia, they had a fleet of 30 mining ships in their crews, along with a promise that more would follow once word spread. As their small rebellion grew, so did the connection between Jackson and Zara. They worked together seamlessly, he providing technical expertise while she offered strategic insight and natural leadership. More importantly, they talked about their pasts, their dreams, their fears for the future. "I never expected this," Zara confessed one evening as they sat in the ship's observation lounge, watching the stars stream past. "When I lost my crown, I thought I'd lost everything. But maybe I needed to lose it to understand what it really meant." "What does it mean?" Jackson asked. "Responsibility, not to a throne or a title, but to the people who depend on you. My parents ruled from a palace, surrounded by courtiers and protocol. But out here, fighting alongside miners and refugees and mechanics, I'm learning what it really means to serve." Jackson reached out and took her hand. "You're going to be an amazing queen." She looked at him, and in her eyes he saw not just gratitude but something deeper, warmer. "I couldn't do this without you. You've given me more than just a crown, Jackson. You've given me hope." The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. Then alarms began blaring throughout the ship, and Nix's voice crackled over the intercom. "All hands to battle stations. We've got company, and they're not friendly." Through the observation window, Jackson could see them approaching. A dozen sleek warships, their hulls marked with the crimson insignia of General Drax's personal fleet. They'd been found. "So much for the element of surprise," Zara said grimly, already moving toward the bridge. "Maybe not," Jackson replied, his mind racing. "Maybe this is exactly the opportunity we've been waiting for." The battle for truth. The enemy fleet moved with predatory grace, their weapons systems already charging for battle. Jackson rushed to the bridge where Zara and Nix were coordinating with their small fleet of mining ships and converted freighters. The odds were hopeless, but neither woman showed any sign of backing down. "They're demanding our surrender," Nix reported. "The lead ship is broadcasting on all frequencies." "Put it through," Zara commanded. The view screen flickered to life, revealing a man in ornate military dress. General Corvin Drax was exactly what Jackson had expected from Zara's descriptions. Tall, imposing, with steel-grey hair and eyes like chips of ice. His face bore the kind of scars that came from real combat, not ceremonial dueling. "Princess Zara," Drax said, his voice carrying mock sympathy, "you've led us quite a chase across the galaxy, but this rebellion ends now. Surrender, and I'll grant you the dignity of a quick death." Zara stepped forward, her armor gleaming under the bridge lights. "The only thing ending today is your illegitimate rule, Corvin. The people deserve to know the truth about what you've done." Drax laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "The people know what I've told them, that the royal family was weak, corrupt, unsuited to rule a galactic empire. I've brought order to the chaos they created." "You've brought fear and oppression," Zara shot back. "But that ends now." She nodded to Jackson, who activated the Crown's communication array. Suddenly, every screen in the Dominion was displaying the same image. Princess Zara Thorne, alive and defiant, speaking directly to her people. "Citizens of the Astral Dominion," she began, her voice carrying across 17 star systems. "Am Princess Zara Thorne, your rightful queen. For 6 months, I have been gathering evidence of General Drax's crimes against our people. Today, I stand before you to reclaim the throne that is mine by right and by the will of our ancestors." Across the galaxy, people stopped what they were doing to watch. In factories and mines, in space stations and planetary capitals, millions. of beings saw their lost princess for the first time in months. More importantly, they saw hope. "You think a pretty speech will save you," Drax snarled. "I have the fleets. I have the weapons. What do you have?" "I have the truth," Zara replied. "And I have people who believe in something better than rule by fear." The fleet of hope. What happened next surprised even Jackson. As Zara continued her broadcast, ships began appearing throughout the system. Not warships, but civilian vessels, cargo haulers, passenger liners, even personal yachts. Thousands of them, all converging on their position. "Where are they coming from?" Nix asked in amazement. "Everywhere," came the reply from their communications officer. "We're receiving messages from ships across the sector. They heard the princess's broadcast and they're coming to help." But it wasn't just civilian ships. Admiral Torex's fleet emerged from hyperspace, their weapons trained on Drax's forces. The Admiral himself appeared on their communication screen, his weathered face creased with determination. "Princess," he said formally, "the outer spiral fleet stands ready to serve. More ships arrived by the minute. Captain Vega's mining fleet, armed with industrial cutting lasers that could slice through battleship armor. A squadron of diplomatic vessels from the allied worlds, their crews tired of Drax's heavy-handed rule. Even pirates and smugglers, drawn by the promise of legitimacy and pardons for past crimes." "This is impossible," Drax said, but for the first time, his voice carried uncertainty. "They're just civilians, miners and merchants. They're citizens," Zara corrected, "and they're tired of being afraid." The battle that followed was unlike anything in the history of space warfare. It wasn't just a clash between military forces, but a revolt by an entire civilization. Civilians used their ships as shields to protect military vessels. Mining lasers cut through enemy hulls, while cargo haulers rammed Drax's fighters. It was chaos, but it was purposeful chaos, directed by a shared vision of freedom. In the midst of the battle, Jackson found himself manning one of the weapon stations alongside Tessa Blackwood, a human engineer who'd joined their cause after escaping from a Drax labor camp. She was brilliant and fearless, her fingers dancing over the controls as she coordinated targeting solutions for their makeshift fleet. "I never thought I'd see anything like this," she said, her voice filled with awe. "An entire galaxy rising up at once." "Neither did I," Jackson admitted. "But maybe that's what it takes. Not just soldiers and weapons, but ordinary people deciding they've had enough." The tide of battle turned when Echo, the AI consciousness that controlled the Royal Fleet's most advanced systems, suddenly came online. The artificial intelligence had been dormant since the fall of the palace, but Zara's crown carried the authorization codes needed to reactivate it. "Princess," Echo's synthesized voice filled the bridge. "I have been waiting. The Royal Fleet stands ready to serve." Suddenly, space around them filled with ships that hadn't been there moments before. Stealth vessels, hidden bases, weapons platforms that had been concealed throughout the system. The true power of the astral dominion revealed itself, and it was overwhelming. The price of victory. Drax's fleet, caught between the civilian uprising and the sudden appearance of the Royal Navy, found itself hopelessly outmatched. But the general wasn't finished. In desperation, he activated a doomsday weapon hidden aboard his flagship, a quantum disruptor capable of destroying entire star systems. "If I can't rule the Dominion," he broadcast, "then no one will. I'll reduce every world to ash before I surrender to a pretender princess." The weapon began charging, its energy signature building to catastrophic levels. Jackson's instruments showed they had minutes before it fired. "Can we stop it?" Zara asked. "Not from here," Jackson replied. "Someone would have to get aboard his ship and shut it down manually." "Then that's what we'll do," Zara said, already moving toward the shuttle bay. "Absolutely not," Nix protested. "I won't let you risk yourself for what? For my people, for the billions of lives that will be lost if that weapon fires." Zara's voice carried the full weight of royal authority. "This is exactly what I should risk myself for." Jackson stepped forward. "Then I'm coming with you." "Jackson, no. You've done enough. You've given me everything I needed to reclaim my throne." Took her hands in his, feeling the warmth of her skin through her armor's gloves. "You once asked me why I was helping you. I said maybe it was my fight now. I meant it." She looked into his eyes and saw the same determination that had driven him to repair her armor in his workshop on Kethera. Together, then, the flight to Drax's flagship was a nightmare of laser fire and explosion. Nix piloted their shuttle through the chaos with skill that bordered on supernatural, weaving between the massive warships, while Jackson and Zara prepared for what awaited them aboard. The enemy vessel. They breached the ship's hull using shaped charges, fighting their way through corridors filled with desperate soldiers. Drax's men fought fiercely, but they were defending a lost cause, and many of them knew it. The general himself waited for them in the ship's main reactor chamber, standing beside the quantum disruptor's control console. He was no longer the polished politician they'd seen on the viewscreen. His uniform was torn, his face streaked with blood and sweat. "You're too late," he said, his finger hovering over the activation switch. "In 30 seconds, this weapon fires, and your precious dominion becomes a graveyard." "It doesn't have to end this way, Corvin," Zara said, stepping forward. "Surrender now, and I'll guarantee you a fair trial." Fair Drax laughed bitterly. "There's nothing fair about this universe, girl. The strong rule, the weak serve. That's the only truth worth knowing." "You're wrong," Jackson said. "The truth is that people are stronger together than apart. That's what you never understood." Drax's finger moved toward the switch, but Zara was faster. Her armor's enhanced reflexes allowed her to cross the chamber in a heartbeat, tackling the general away from the controls. They crashed to the deck in a tangle of armor and limbs. The fight was brief but vicious. Drax was skilled and desperate, but Zara had been trained by the best warriors in the galaxy. More importantly, she was fighting not for power or glory, but for the people she loved. When it was over, Drax lay unconscious on the deck, and the quantum disruptor powered down with a whine of dying energy. Throughout the fleet, the news spread quickly. The tyrant was defeated, the weapon was safe, and Princess Zara Thorne was alive and victorious. The crown of stars, the coronation, took place 3 weeks later on Astral Prime, the capital world of the Dominion. The ceremony was broadcast across all 17 star systems, watched by billions of beings who had lived through months of fear and oppression. Jackson stood in the place of honor, wearing formal robes that felt strange after months in work clothes. The crown he had forged rested on a cushion of pure starlight silk, its crystalline structure catching and reflecting the light of a dozen suns. Zara approached the throne with dignity and grace, but also with the confident stride of someone who had earned her position through battle rather than birth. She had insisted that the ceremony include representatives from every species in the Dominion, a symbol of the unity she hoped to build. Princess Zara Thorne, the High Chancellor, intoned, "Do you swear to rule with wisdom? To protect the innocent, and to serve the greater good of all beings within the astral dominion. I do. So swear, she replied, her voice carrying clearly across the vast throne room. Then by the ancient laws of our people, and by the will of the citizens you serve, I crown you Queen Zara the First, sovereign of the astral dominion, protector of 17 systems, and guardian of the peace. As the crown settled onto her head, its crystals blazed with inner fire. The neural interface activated, connecting Zara to every communication system in the Dominion. For a moment, she was no longer just one person, but the living voice of an entire civilization. My people, she said, and her words echoed across the galaxy. Today we begin a new chapter in our history. Not a return to the old ways, but a journey toward something better. We have learned that strength comes not from conquering others, but from standing together, that true power lies not in fear, but in hope. The celebration lasted for days, but Jackson found himself drawn away from the crowds and ceremonies. He stood on a balcony overlooking the capital city, watching the lights twinkle like earthbound stars. Escaping from your own party? Zara asked, joining him at the railing. She had changed from her ceremonial robes into simpler clothes, though she still wore the crown. It seemed to have become part of her, no longer just an ornament, but an extension of her very being. Just thinking, he replied. 6 months ago, I was a hermit living in a cave, fixing broken machinery for food. Now I'm standing in a palace, on the most important world in the galaxy. Any regrets? He turned to look at her, this remarkable woman who had crash-landed into his life and changed everything. Only one. What's that? I never got to finish repairing that plasma cutter you interrupted me working on. She laughed, the sound bright and joyful in the evening air. I love you, Jackson Reed. I love you too, Your Majesty. Just Zara, she said, leaning against him. When we're alone, I'm just Zara. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the city below. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new responsibilities, new threats to the peace they had fought so hard to achieve. But tonight, they had each other and the knowledge that they had made a difference. What happens now? Jackson asked. Now we build something beautiful, Zara replied. Together. Epilogue. The Forge of Tomorrow. 1 year later, Jackson stood in his new workshop on Astral Prime. It was larger than his old cave on Kethera, filled with the most advanced technology the Dominion could provide. But he had kept the essential spirit of the place, the sense that this was where broken things came to be made whole. He was working on a new project, a communication device that would allow instant contact between the furthest reaches of the Dominion. It was delicate work, requiring him to integrate technologies from a dozen different species. Still tinkering? Zara asked from the doorway. She was dressed in her royal armor, but the crown was absent. She only wore it for official functions. Now, preferring to rule through cooperation rather than symbolic authority. Always, he replied, not looking up from his work. Tessa thinks this new design could revolutionize interstellar communication. No more delays, no more signal degradation across galactic distances. And what do you think? I think it's going to work. But more importantly, I think it's going to bring people together, make the galaxy feel a little smaller, a little more connected. Zara moved to stand beside him, watching his hands move with practiced precision. You know, the Council of Ministers has been asking about you again. They think you should accept an official position, Chief Technology Advisor, maybe, or Minister of Innovation. Jackson paused in his work and looked at her. What do you think? I think you're already doing exactly what you should be doing. You're fixing things, making them better. The title doesn't matter. Good, he said, returning to his work. Because I like being just a mechanic. Even if my girlfriend happens to rule the galaxy, fiance, she corrected with a smile. Right. Even if my fiancé happens to rule the galaxy. Outside the workshop, the sun was setting over the capital city. The streets were busy with beings from dozens of different worlds, all living and working together in peace. It wasn't perfect. There were still problems, still conflicts to resolve, and challenges to overcome. But it was better than what had come before. In the distance, ships were launching from the orbital platforms, carrying traders and diplomats and explorers to the far reaches of space. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders yet to be discovered. But here, in a workshop where a human mechanic fixed things with alien tools while his queen watched and smiled, the future was being built one piece at a time, and it was beautiful.